Good morning. Quick video summary of our discussion from last week on our hypothetical patient that came in with acute low back pain. We did first the physical exam and then treatment. I think for the most part you guys did a really good job with this. You all had a good idea where you wanted to go with the examination. I think one of the things that we continually work on with our with you guys in the residency is making sure that your exam is efficient, and also considering that for day one you don't need to do everything on the physical exam. You want to plan it out, you want to consider multiple hypotheses, but in particular with our hypothetical patient, this was a person coming in with acute back pain who's fairly irritable. We probably don't want to put them through unnecessary exam procedures. So things like assessing for body mechanics at this point probably really wouldn't be relevant. The person's coming in, they're stiff, they're painful. We really aren't going to get a good assessment of that. Doing things like maybe the slump test and the straight leg raise, there's probably not a reason to do both of those. Those are both sort of neurodynamic tests, or tests for mechanosensitivity of the sciatic nerve tract. In my opinion, I usually won't do the slump in someone that's in acute pain, just because it seems to be more of an aggravating thing and I might not get much information out of it. Straight leg raise seems to be a little bit easier to do gently. And I think most of you guys would probably at least explore some sort of repeated motions with this patient, given that their history suggests a directional preference or a potential directional preference. Most of you guys would look at mobility of the spine, maybe look at the hips, and then consider looking at the straight leg raise just to kind of assess for a potential radiculopathy. The patient had pain in the buttock, but not below that. I think doing a quick neuroscreen also, most of you guys mentioned that. So our exam could be relatively short or tailored for this patient. And really my goal would be rule out red flags and then find some sort of position or mobilization technique, manipulation technique that's going to get his pain under control. That would be my day one goal. And if there's other things I need to look at, I might save that for later on. And then when we talked about treatment, I think everybody had some good ideas, whether you might go with a kind of repeated motions, directional preference approach, which this patient seemed to fit. Of course, not jumping all the way to end range, repeated extension. I think this patient, or patients like these, probably need a gradual approach, considering also doing maybe some manipulation or mobilization in conjunction with that to help facilitate motion and decrease pain. And that might be kind of it for day one. And then we talked about how you would progress this patient, and I think everybody had some really good ideas of when would we, if we're going with mostly extension in the beginning, how would we progress to other directions? When would we start to work on kind of functional stuff to get back to work? And I think a lot of you guys were sort of talking about a graded exposure approach for this patient. Once their symptoms are under control, then gradually sort of reloading them, given the nature of his work is heavy manual labor. We need to make sure he's comfortable with that and can do it prior to returning to work. The concept of body mechanics and proper lifting is interesting. That's sort of a controversial one. There's not a lot of research one way or the other that there is one best way to lift or bend or do anything. So we probably just want to make sure that he is using a variety of positions and postures throughout the day, not only getting into one position that's repeatedly sort of loading the same area of his back, making sure that he's not too stiff or guarded with those activities. Like doing things like bracing his abdominals all the time. We tend to see that. Some patients do it consciously or unconsciously. So those are some things we might want to look out for. The other thing I don't think you guys really picked up on is this patient, he got injured not from improper lifting or too much, but because he was working a lot. He was tired, he was fatigued, he was in a more vulnerable state. And that's when we often see people sort of break down, whether they are stressed out from something, maybe they have a sick family member. In this case, he was just working a lot of overtime, so his body was in a bit of a vulnerable state. So I think that's something we could talk to him about and just say, you know, during these times, your back or your body's going to be a little more vulnerable. Your job itself, you've been doing that for a long time. It's not bad for you. Your spine's meant to be loaded. It's a healthy thing. So he doesn't get the impression that, you know, his job is too heavy for him, because that's really not the case with this patient. So just something to consider, that we don't want to cause misplaced beliefs with our patient. We'll get into further this week about the sort of motor control stabilization approach, which some of you guys were mentioning. And you know, we can share our thoughts and opinions on that. So overall, great job on this, and hopefully it's getting you thinking about manual therapy, directional preference, how those things how to work together, when you would use them, when you would not, the efficiency of your examination, the importance of that graded exposure approach, particularly for those work-related low back pain patients. So we covered a lot with this case, and I think you guys did a great job, and I look forward to seeing our discussions this week.